Hey everybody, welcome to the video. It's Monday, May 17th, and we're breaking down this 8-game main slate that we have over on DraftKings today. And I'm thinking this is a pretty good size slate. Not too many games, not too little games. I think 8's right there, kind of in that perfect range of games today. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure you guys are as well. If you do find this video helpful in any way possible, please leave a like. And if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out. I really do appreciate it. If you want to follow me over on social media, down in the bottom corner of your screen. And if you want to help with the channel over on Patreon, get access to some extra content. Link is down below for that to join the community of several hundred members. We got projections, optimizer, ownership projections, rankings, cheat sheets, data sheets, Discord community, all that fun stuff. Link is down below. But I think that's it for the plug. So without further ado, let's dive into today's video. And as per usual, we will start with the pitching and move on to the bats. There's not a whole lot I like at pitcher today, but I do like three guys quite a bit. We got two spend up SP1 aces, if that's what we want to call them, which they are. And then we have an SP2 option in Kikuchi here at $7,800 and a really good matchup versus Detroit. So I think there's two ways you can go today. Or actually, I think there's three ways you can go. So maybe if you're building three lineups today, maybe you could go a Garrett Cole lineup with Kikuchi, a Darvish lineup with Kikuchi, then you could do a double spend up lineup with Cole and Darvish, because looking at some of the roster construction, I think we can make that work because there are some pretty decent cheap plays today. But I think it's kind of good just to mix and match these guys for the most part. But if you are playing one lineup, it might be just worth it to go one of these spend up options plus Kikuchi just to save a little bit more money for an expensive bat here or there. But anyway, we'll start up top with Garrett Cole, $10,900, and it's going to be pretty hard to pass him up here versus the Texas Rangers, but the same can be said for Darvish and a really good matchup at home versus the Colorado Rockies, who are absolutely awful on the road. He also has a lower implied team total against him, but liking the strikeout upside here for Garrett Cole. He's coming off an amazing game where he had 43.6 points versus Tampa Bay, and he's been flawless all season long. His worst game, I believe, is around 16 fantasy points, and he's had multiple games in the 30s. He's even had two games at around 43 points. So the guy's been absolutely amazing this year, looking at his numbers. And 125 innings pitched since last season. He's averaging around 100 pitches per game, 97 on his fastball, 2.79 xFIP, 2.6 SIERA, a near 36% K rate, not really walking many guys, 12.3 Ks per 9. There's really nothing bad here, maybe besides a high fly ball rate. He will give some power here or there, especially to lefties, but even then, Garrett Cole has been absolutely amazing, and I do like picking on the Texas Rangers quite a bit with pitching, and you're going to be hard-pressed to find many better pitchers than Garrett Cole. Maybe you could say Shane Bieber, Jacob deGrom, but he's right there in the upper echelon of the truly elite pitchers in the entire league, so I'm definitely in on Garrett Cole here. Looking at the matchup versus the Rangers, they have a 27.6% K rate to righties this season. They are walking quite a bit, and they do actually have some decent numbers in terms of the WRC plus WOBA and on-base percentage, but even then, I'm liking the strikeout upside here, and I could play Garrett Cole versus any lineup in baseball, and the Rangers are not one I'm really too scared of. Yeah, they got a couple good bats in there, but even then, Garrett Cole should be fine in this matchup. 10 plus Ks are definitely in the cards here. Should go probably around 7 innings, and I'd have to imagine he's going to pick up the win here because I'm liking the Yankee stack quite a bit today versus Jordan Lyles. Just not a very good pitcher, and assuming he can go the necessary 5 plus innings, which I don't think will be a problem, I think Garrett Cole picks up that win, probably gets around double-digit strikeouts, and has a really good game fantasy-wise, probably only gives up a run or two, maybe even 0 runs. I think that's possible as well. Vegas has the Rangers at a 3.02 implied team total. Cole has a 71% chance for a win and a 9.5K prop over in Vegas, so you can definitely sign me up for all the Garrett Cole I can handle today. If you need to save $700, Yu Darvish is a fine tournament pivot here. I feel like the more popular pitcher between the two will be Garrett Cole, but Yu Darvish is still a fine option here versus the Rockies at home because the Rockies are just a terrible baseball team in general this season, and then when you take them out of Coors Field, they definitely get a lot worse, and they only have a 2.98 implied team total here, lower than what the Rangers have versus Garrett Cole. Still a decently heavy favorite and a 7.5K prop over in Vegas, and while his numbers aren't as great as Garrett Cole, they're still pretty good dating back to last season. Similar innings pitched sample size, about 95 pitches per game, 2.04 ERA, 3.17 xFIP, 3.17 SIERA. Those are exactly the same. 31.3% K rate, not really walking many guys, doesn't give up any power whatsoever. And if we're looking at the Rockies splits this season versus right-handed pitching, you gotta keep in mind some of these numbers are coming in from Coors Field, so it's going to boost it up a little bit. But even then, it's still not overly impressive, and WRC Plus will keep that in consideration from park factors and things like that. But they're not striking out a lot versus righties, only a 22.6% K rate, but everything else is pretty low. 151 ISO, 8% walk rate, 76 WRC Plus, which is what I'm kind of talking about when you factor in the park factors. Throwing well with 303 on base percentage, so I think this is still a really good spot here for Yu Darvish, even though he struggled in the last matchup versus them, but the circumstances are different this time, so I do like Yu Darvish here quite a bit, pitching at home in Petco, which is a very pitcher-friendly park, especially when you compare it to Coors Field. Then you say Kikuchi, 7,800 bucks. I like him as a nice salary save option here. Only a 3.31 implied team total against him. Pretty heavy favorite, 6K prop as well. And dating back to last season, while his numbers aren't elite like Garrett Cole and Yu Darvish, so they're going to pop up bright red here because they're only comparing him against those two pitchers. They're not terrible. The ERA is near 5, but his underlying numbers are a bit better at 3.53 xFIP, 95 on his fastball, 3.96 Sierra, nice 25% K rate. We'll walk some guys, but isn't really giving up much power whatsoever. Only a 116 ISO given up and a 52% ground ball rate with only a 29% hard contact rate. So I do like those numbers. And if we're looking at the Detroit Tigers splits this season versus lefties, they're some of the worst, if not the worst in the league, really. 34.1% K rate, which is horrendous, 7% walk rate, a 0.66 ISO, 266 on base percentage, a 243 WOBA, and an absolutely putrid 54 WRC+. So if we're just simply playing the matchup game here, I'm loving Yusei Kikuchi. And we played way worse pitchers versus Detroit that are lefties versus them, and it's worked out. So I think Kikuchi can have a fine outing here, probably close to 20 fantasy points, especially if he can pick up that win. And I think the Seattle Mariners do make a halfway decent stack tonight. They're not my favorite stack, but I think they're actually in a decent spot, especially the lefties. So if I can pick up a win for Kikuchi, that 4-point bonus could go a long way. So if you're looking to save some salary as your SP2 tonight, if you don't want to double spend up, I think Kikuchi is a pretty elite option for the most part tonight. There's a couple of other pitchers you could look at today, but for the most part, these three are where I'm kind of centering my builds around tonight. And if you're playing 3-max contests, it might be a good idea just to get like 2 to 3 in every single lineup and just mixing and matching. So where you don't have 100% of a guy where if one of them happens to get blown up somehow, you won't be absolutely screwed. So it might be nice to hedge yourself that way, but maybe like a Cole Kikuchi lineup, Darvish Kikuchi, then a Cole and Darvish lineup. I think that could be a decent way to go tonight if you are playing a 3-max contest. But that's kind of it for the pitching, kind of short and sweet, just 3 pitchers I want to talk about. So let's move right on to the bets. And as per usual, we'll start with the catcher position, move around the diamond, hit the outfield as well. And something to keep in mind when watching these videos, a lot of times these guys will switch spots in the batting order than what I have them projected for, or they'll be out because I'm doing this right in the morning. And a lot of things can change once those lineup cards do come out. So it's something to keep in mind there. But anyway, starting up top with catcher, we have Yerman Mercedes at 4,600 bucks. And I think there's several really good spend-up catchers today. I think you could look at Wilson Contreras versus a lefty. You could also look at his team at Yasmani Grandal. But if I am picking one spend-up guy, as of right now, I'm thinking Yerman Mercedes is a pretty solid option here at 4,600 because he's been swinging a pretty hot bat so far this season. A very surprisingly hot bat. He's batting .358 with a 410 WOBA. ISO's close to 200, 169 WRC+, and not really striking out too much. And I've been having some success with him on MLB The Show as well. Not that that means anything here, but it is giving me good vibes for tonight here versus a lefty in J.A. Happ, who's just really not that great of a pitcher. Yes, he's okay, but he's still not that great. You can certainly pick on him, and Vegas would agree, considering the Chicago White Sox have a 4.8 implied team total here. So I do like Mercedes here versus the lefty. Looking at his split specifically versus lefties this season, he's batting 432 plate appearances, 267 ISO, 463 WOBA, and a 206 WRC plus with a really, really good 6.3% K rate. So you can definitely sign me up here for some Yerman Mercedes. I think he's a fine option if you do have the money to spend it for a catcher tonight. Kyle Higashioka, 3,400 bucks. Assuming he's in the lineup here, only 3,400 bucks, and he's just kind of a cheaper part of that Yankee stack with team total close to 5 today. Would not surprise me if that surpasses 5 by the time first pitch happens. But so far this season, while he's not batting for a high average, he does have some decent pop in his bat so far with a 353 ISO compared to his 196 batting average, a nice 363 WOBA, 549 slugging. Does strike out quite a bit, but does walk quite a bit as well, and does have a decent fly ball rate. So Kyle Higashioka, I think he's fine at 3,400 bucks because I do like picking on Jordan Lyles for the most part. He's been a guy I picked on a lot this year. I don't have the stats to back it up, but I feel like he's the pitcher I've stacked against the most for the most part this season. I'd be interested to see if there's any numbers I could look at to find that out, but I do like picking on Lyles here. They do have the highest implied team total in the slate at 4.98 as of right now. I could see that rising closer to 5 by the time first pitch happens, but looking at the numbers for Jordan Lyles since last season, in a near 100 inning sample size, close to a 7 ERA, 5.53 xFIP, 5.2 Sierra, 16% K rate, close to a 9% walk rate, and giving up a 212 ISO. So definitely not the most impressive numbers out there. And this Yankees lineup definitely has a decent amount of pop there. So do like all the Yankees for the most part. And if you just want a cheap part of the Yankees lineup, Kyle Higashioka is a fine option at a position that's usually not that great. Then Kurt Suzuki here at 2,900 bucks versus the lefty in Cleveland. Look, I'm an Indians fan, but this guy's not that great, and we could definitely use some of these Angels bats versus him. They have a 4.71 implied team total, which isn't great, but Suzuki's not that expensive, only 2,900 bucks, and while he's not been hitting that well this season, only batting 190 with a 0.86 ISO. In the past, Kurt Suzuki's definitely been a guy we could use versus left-handed pitching. He doesn't really strike out too much, and so far this season, while it's not amazing, his numbers are better versus lefties, where he's got a 111 WRC plus, only a 14% K rate. Grounding ball, he's grounding out a lot though, close to a 70% ground ball rate, but I still think he's okay for the price tag for the most part, and it's kind of similar to Higashioka, where if you can't afford the expensive Angels like Anthony Rendon and Mike Trout, if you just want a cheap part of that lineup just to get exposure to them, Kurt Suzuki below $3,000 I think is an okay option. Then dropping out of first base, we have Jose Abreu, $5,400 versus the lefty J.A. Happ. So far this season versus lefties, and even dating back to last season, he's been killing left-handed pitching, but close to a 400 ISO versus lefties this year, close to a 200 WRC plus, strikeout rate above 20%, but 40.9% hard contact rate, batting close to 300 with a 429 WOBA. I think Abreu is fine in White Sox stacks, which are looking like one of the better offenses to target tonight. Luke Voit, $5,000. We don't really have many numbers to use this season because he just came back, only a 21 play appearance sample size. It's not been good for him so far, but we know he's got plenty of power in his bat, especially if you're looking at last year. And Jordan Lyles is a guy I like to pick on. I think I just mentioned that with Kyle Higashioka. So if you got the money for Voit and you're just full stacking the Yankees, I like getting the Voit, but he's probably only a tournament option for me. Then Shohei Ohtani, $4,700. There wasn't much I liked at the values, like in the value bats today at first base. I think you could maybe look at Miggy. I think he's only $2,700. I think Jonathan Scope's there as well, but I kind of like Kikuchi way more than I like some of the righties on the Detroit Tigers, so I left him off. So this is looking like maybe a decent spend-up position here, but there's probably going to be a value bat that'll pop up later in the day. But as of right now, nothing I really like too much. But Shohei Ohtani, $4,700. I know it's a lefty-on-lefty matchup here, and I don't really love Ohtani versus lefties. He's still shown plenty of power versus them this season, but he's striking out quite a bit with a 30% K rate, and he's also only batting 188 versus them. Still a nice 309 WOBA comparatively to what his overall numbers could be versus lefties, and a near 300 ISO, but not walking whatsoever, striking out a ton, gets a near 60% ground ball rate. So obviously we do prefer him versus right-handed pitching, but if they can get to the lefty here early on, he should see a righty at some point. And Shohei Ohtani's been one of the best players in baseball this season. He's been absolutely phenomenal. I mean, he's been pitching fine. He's obviously hitting rockets, it seems like almost every single day, near 600 slugging this season with a 336 ISO and a 381 WOBA. So just get past that lefty-on-lefty matchup early on. I think he'll be a fine option. Also eligible in the outfield as well. Then also dropping down to second base, we have DJ LeMahieu, who you could also play at third base, but he's mainly just part of the Yankee stack for the most part. He's very expensive, and he doesn't have a ton of power in his bat, so I'd kind of lean toward using the guys like Aaron Judge and Close Stand just because they have more home run upside. But DJ LeMahieu is still a fine option if you do have the money for him. Just he is very expensive, but I do like using pretty much anybody here versus Jordan Lyles. So far this season, he's batting 272. Not a lot of power in his bat so far this season, like I was mentioning earlier, though. Less than a 100 ISO. Doesn't strike out too much, and does walk a good amount, double-digit walk rate. Getting a lot of ground balls, though. 56% ground ball rate, and obviously not hitting many dongers, so I don't love the price tag for LeMahieu. He's just more of a tournament option for me. Jake Cronenworth, $4,200, lefty on righty matchup here versus John Gray. And while I don't love picking on John Gray, especially outside of Coors Field, I still think we can use some lefties here versus him because he is pretty tough on righties, but he does struggle a little bit with the lefties. And Jake Cronenworth's a guy that I just like going to for this price tag for the most part because he's just one of the guys I like to target because he's just such a good overall hitter. Like, he does make a lot of contact, doesn't really strike out too much, is batting close to 300 this season with only a 13.1% K rate. And even last year, he showed that as a rookie where he hit for a high average, didn't really strike out too much, and he's kind of showing that once again this season. While the numbers aren't quite as good, it's still pretty solid. $4,200 should hit near the top of the order. Do you like Cronenworth despite that low implied team total for the San Diego Padres? Then Larry Garcia, $2,900. You could also play him in the outfield, but he's just a cheap righty on lefty matchup here versus J.A. Happ. Should hit near the top of the order for a stack that I like quite a bit today. So if we're just looking for some value, I think Garcia is a fine option at $2,900, even though his numbers have been pretty bad this year. Going to third base, Josh Donaldson, $5,400. He's been swinging a pretty good bat this season, especially recently. And you get the righty on lefty matchup here versus Dallas Keuchel, who I don't really like playing bats against too much because he's just got such a high ground ball rate. It makes it kind of annoying to stack against him. Because if we're looking at his splits since last season, the guy's got a 55.8% ground ball rate and a 21.2% fly ball rate. Doesn't really give up many fly balls, which kind of sucks for the home run department because, as you can see, only half a home run per 9 inning. But Vegas does like the Twins here, and they have a lot of bats in the lineup that can hit lefties pretty well. You got Donaldson, Nelson Cruz, Mitch Garver. Unfortunately, there's going to be no Byron Buxton, but I still think Josh Donaldson's a fine bat here for some power upside versus lefties because he has been hitting lefties pretty well so far this season. As you can see, a 346 batting average, 427 OBA, 154 ISO, and a WRC plus close to 200, not really striking out much as well. He actually has a higher walk rate than a strikeout rate versus lefties this season, which is some pretty good ratios. So I think he's fine if you got the money for him. If you are stacking up some of these power righty bats for the Twins, you could also throw in Miguel Sano in there as well. Then Anthony Rendon, $5,200. He gets a nice matchup here versus lefty in Cleveland, and I know his numbers haven't been amazing this year. It's a 79 plate appearance sample size because he was hurt for a good amount of time, but it's still not been impressive for Rendon this season. Only a 159 ISO, 246 batting average, 324 WOBA. Versus lefties, his numbers don't really get much better either. He's only batting 118, which is worse than his overall numbers. 176 ISO, which is improved from his overall numbers, and only a 14% carry, which is right on par with his walk rate, 14.3% as well. And he's getting a lot of fly balls, 60% fly ball rate versus lefties. So I'd have to imagine these numbers are going to improve, but I do like the Angels here. I think they're a decent stack here versus Cleveland, so $5,200 isn't a bad play for him, especially when he's batting cleanup on a pretty darn good offense. And then Kyle Seager, $4,500. I do like lefties versus Casey Mize here. While he has improved this season, I think some of these lefties in the Seattle lineup could be decent contrarian plays, so I don't mind Kyle Seager here, and he's shown some pop this season. 238 ISO overall, so I think Kyle Seager's fine at $4,500 if you don't want to spend top dollar for a third baseman today. And then dropping out a shortstop, Tim Anderson, $5,300. He's been swinging a pretty good bat so far this season. In 129 plate appearances, he's batting 328, which is kind of on par with Tim Anderson. He's always been a high batting average guy. 370 WOBA, not a ton of power, but you don't really need it. Not everyone's going to have a 200 plus ISO. 164 is respectable for a guy that hits for a really high average. 142 WRC plus, 500 slugging, 364 on base percentages, striking out quite a bit and getting a lot of ground balls, but do like all the righties here versus J Happ, and Tim Anderson I think is a fine option up top. Gio Urshela, $4,800. I can imagine him being pretty popular today. He's got multi-position eligibility. Also, you can play him at third base as well. And as you could see when I showed you guys the third baseman, there wasn't really many good spend down options today. So I feel like Urshela at $4,800, while he's not super cheap, he's not overly expensive as well. And he's just kind of like a middle piece to that Yankees lineup, and he's been playing well this season, batting close to 300 with a 171 ISO, 125 WRC plus, and it's mainly just trying to pick on Jordan Lyles for the most part. And then for a cheap shortstop, I know he should be batting near the bottom of the order here, but the other guys that I was thinking about putting on here would be as well, like Kim, also Tyler Wade, and Andrelton Simmons. I thought they were all kind of the okay cheap options here, so I went with David Fletcher just because I like that offense quite a bit. 4.71 implied team total versus lefty in Cleveland. I know David Fletcher hasn't had the greatest numbers in the world, but you can see why he's got the bump down the order. Batting 250, it's not terrible, doesn't strike out a lot. Maybe more of a wraparound kind of guy where you could stack like the 9, 1, 2, 3, so you're still getting them in consecutive order, but not loving it here, but I'm not really liking any of the cheap shortstops as well. I think Kim's a fine option, Simmons, and even Tyler Wade. I think at the bottom of the order for the Yankees, you could use him as a wraparound guy as well, but yeah, not really liking the cheap options here at shortstop today. Then dropping out of the outfield, we have Mike Trout, $6,100. I prefer him versus left-handed pitching, but even then, it's still fine numbers versus them. It's just not quite as good as what he has versus righties. A 265 batting average, 348 WOBA. Virtually no power so far this season versus lefties, and it's kind of weird because it's Mike Trout, but versus righties, he's just so insanely good. It just props those overall numbers up quite a bit, but I always prefer him versus righties, but I'm still not scared of who's on the mound for Cleveland, so I think Mike Trout's still a fine option, but probably only a tournament option for me because of that massive price point. And then we have Giancarlo Stanton, Aaron Judge here. Both pretty much the same play for the most part. If I had to pick one, I would prefer Aaron Judge over Stanton, but still both fine plays nonetheless. But both guys so far this season have had some pretty good numbers, both batting close to 300. Aaron Judge has the higher WOBA, but still both pretty respectable. Aaron Judge overall just really has the better numbers, but both guys are very similar plays to me. They're similarly priced. If I had to pick one, I am picking Judge, but you can't go wrong with either. Nelson Cruz, $4,100, just a righty on lefty matchup here. We know Nelson Cruz has just some of the best numbers versus lefties since a few seasons now, or not even a few seasons, just really over the course of his career. The guy's just been an absolute monster versus lefties, and so far this season, he is definitely backing that up with a 364 batting average, 429 WOBA, 227 ISO, 181 WRC plus, and just some overall really good numbers. I'm not sure I love him today versus Keuchel because the guy's just a big ground ball guy, but still, anytime Nelson Cruz is facing a lefty, he's definitely going to be on our radar. Then Jordan Luplow, $3,100, not quite as good versus lefty as Nelson Cruz, but I remember a couple seasons back where Jordan Luplow was nearly outpacing Cruz and Gito Martinez versus lefties, and we know how good both of those guys are versus left-handed pitching, especially think that was in 2019 where they were just absolutely murdering left-handed pitching. But so is Jordan Luplow, and so far this season, while his numbers aren't great in terms of like batting average and things like that, he still has shown some decent pop versus left-handed pitching. Where he's got a 223 ISO with a 23% fly ball rate and only a 22% ground ball rate with a near 70% fly ball rate. So some really good ratios there in terms of fly ball to ground ball ratio. So I think Jordan Luplow is fine here versus the lefty. Looking at Patrick Sandoval's numbers, we haven't really talked about that yet. He's not the worst pitcher out there, but you can definitely pick on him a little bit, I would say. Like 5.73 ERA since last season, 4.11 xFIP's definitely a lot better, so he has been getting a little bit unlucky in that category. But 21% K rate, close to double-digit walk rate. Does give up a lot of power, 280 ISO. Gets a lot of ground balls, unfortunately, but I still think Luplow is fine at $3,100. Clint Frazier, if you're just trying to get a cheap part of the Yankees stacks, I really don't have many good things to say about Clint Frazier, but should be near the middle of the order for the Yankees, and I like picking on Jordan Lyles. Jared Kalanick, $3,000. I think he should be pretty popular tonight. Only $3,000. Lefty on righty matchup here versus Casey Mize. I do like using lefties versus him, and it's just a small sample size for Kalanick here so far this season, so I'm not going to really put too much stock into any of these numbers. But the guy's highly touted. I mean, obviously he's got plenty of upside. He should have a good career. So I think at $3,000 leading off, he should be a fine option here. And I kind of mentioned earlier with Kyle Seager, where I think these lefties would make a decent contrarian stack tonight. I don't think Kalanick will be contrarian. I think he should be pretty popular, but do like him nonetheless. And then Kyle Garlick, $2,400. Only 58 plate appearances this season, but he is batting .291, so some actually decent numbers. 120 WRC plus, 200 ISO. He's dirt cheap, should be leading off here for the Twins versus a lefty, so I think he's a fine option if you just need a cheap portion of that Twin stack. But with that being said, guys, I think that's going to do it for the video, so I hope it was helpful, and if it was, make sure you leave a like. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out, and I really do appreciate it. If you want access into the entire spreadsheet, which has every single play here, not just my little player pool here. I got projections, top stacks tool, all that fun stuff. A cheat sheet I do update throughout the day, and when lineups come in, do update my spreadsheet. So that batting order projected, we'll get batting order confirmed here, and everything will be up to date. So link is down below for that. You can just hop into the Discord, ask me questions throughout the day, and come in and hang out. It's a pretty good community over there. But I will stop rambling. Follow me on social media if you want, and I wish you guys the best of luck, and I'll see you in the next video.